Sorry about that. I completely forgot to play the commercial.
Guam is resilient, but today, too many families are being stretched thin. Costs are rising faster than paychecks. Neighborhoods don't feel as safe as they should. Healthcare is harder to access, and for many, opportunity feels just out of reach. That's not the future we should accept. When Guam has faced its hardest moments, Frank Bloss Jr. has been there, leading, from guiding recovery after Super Typhoon Pongsonghua to serving as Guam's first Homeland Security Advisor, to strengthening public safety and emergency preparedness. He's built a career on protecting our people and delivering results when it matters. He understands how to make government respond, act, and serve. Dr. Mary Okada has spent her life expanding opportunity. As a nationally recognized education leader, she has helped thousands of students gain the skills to succeed, whether in the workforce, higher education, or public service. Her work has strengthened Guam's workforce pipeline, supported economic growth, and opened doors for the next generation. She knows that investing in people, education, job training, and community health is how we build a stronger island. Together, they bring proven leadership across the issues that matter most. Safer communities, a stronger, more prepared government, better access to healthcare, real pathways to good-paying jobs, and an economy that works for local families, not against them. They don't just talk about solutions, they've delivered them. This election comes down to one question: who is ready to lead on day one? With a record of service, results, and leadership Guam can trust, Frank Bloss Jr. and Mary Okada are ready. Frank Bloss Jr. for governor, Dr. Mary Okada for lieutenant governor. Tested, trusted leaders. Ready on day one.
Welcome to the month of June. Welcome, most especially to the month where we honor St. Joseph, the foster father of our Lord. Welcome to the month where we honor Philippine independence, which celebrates its anniversary of Independence Day on June 12th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's June 12th. It's not June 11th. It's June 12th, Philippine Independence Day. And, you know, I was raised by my dad, so I have a lot of respect for my dad. I have a lot of respect for fathers. And, you know, of course, this is the month of Father's Day. And I was listening to some jokes about how Father's Day is like the bad stepchild of all of the holidays, right? Like it goes Christmas, then Mother's Day, and then like all of these other holidays. And like number 20 is Father's Day. And one of the comedians was like, I don't even know what the other 18 holidays are. But Father's Day is all the way at the bottom or whatever. And I was like, all right. So I'm going to celebrate Father's Day this year by going to my dad's grave. I don't even know when Father's Day is. I can't tell you. I think Mother's Day is like the second Sunday in May, right? I think that's what it is. I don't know. I know Father's Day is on a Sunday. I don't know, whatever. You know, I'm not big on the patriarchy, so let's not go there. Good morning. My name is Troy Torres. It is the Monday News Analysis. It's 8:14 a.m. on Monday, June 1, 2026. I first have to apologize for, and I want to say I'm sorry for not having the Troy Torres show last night. I tried. I had a router issue. I have to take my router into Docomo this morning because I think it fried. Like I think there was like a surge, something that happened right before I was starting the show. And I had like a whole show planned and everything about GDOE. So I rolled that over to this morning where we're going to talk about, and you know, a lot of this is my fault. All of it's my fault. I don't normally pay attention to the meetings as they're happening, to the government meetings as they're happening, especially the legislative session, unless it's something like, you know, something that's savory and it's really in the moment, right? And I certainly don't press play when I get the YouTube notification that comes on that the Guam Education Board is meeting. And so I miss quite a bit, right? So I very much value our sources who send me things and they're like, hey, did you see this? And I'm like, no, can you tell me what minute and second I need to start at, because I'm not going to watch all 3 hours. That's just not, I just don't have that time, or I have the time, but that time's going to be used on something else. I'm not going to be listening to people's stupid yapping. about irrelevant things in these meetings. I want to get to the meat of it, right? So most sources, they send me the timestamp and where things are relevant. And then of course I'll listen to the entire thing that surrounds for greater context, right? If something is good, I found something good that somebody sent me. It was a December 17, 2025, so not even 6 months ago. P.S., just as not even a tangent, but a non sequitur here. Being that it's June 1, that means that it's 1 month and 7 days until, this is significant, my friends, 1 month and 7 days until pretrial motions become due in the Tenorio corruption case. Things are going to get popping in this island come July 8 when those motions are due. Now, I don't know if they'll be filed under seal. They shouldn't be, right? And there should be some type of hearing that's scheduled. I believe it's in the calendar where they get to go back and forth on the motions. And then after the motions are filed, then come the responses or the replies to the motions. And then after that come the responses to the replies. And it's just all of this, like not all, but a lot of stuff is going to come to light in these documents. It's going to be such an exciting July. Anyway, where was I at? That has nothing to do with today's show. December 17, 2026, Senator Vince Bora holds a community roundtable. And this, if I'm not mistaken, follows news or not, was it news or leaks of an audit, a management audit of the Guam Education Board about how screwed up that board is because of certain things, right? And it's an independent audit done by a verified, like DOE went and got this independent auditor. Like it's DOE's own procurement of the auditor. And that independent auditor came back and said, look, you got problems at your Guam Education Board, and these are the problems. And so Senator Vince Bora holds a community roundtable. And a woman named Doris Bukikosa comes forward. She's recently retired from the Guam Department of Education. And what she says about the board, and when you add the context of the last 6 months, because what she says is just about the board, because that's it. Judy Wampat hadn't come to office at the time as the superintendent. It's a scary thing when you place into the context the multiplier effect of adding in what people are now saying about the Wampat administration over at Guam Department of Education. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to bring you the full clip of Doris Bukikosa. And then I want to talk about, there's a story in the Guam Daily Post and an op-ed in the Pacific Daily News that are complementary, I believe. One is a story by Walter Ujoa in the Post about how in the chairman's mark of the new National Defense Authorization Act, the housing construction for the military has been axed out, and the concerns that there are, especially considering that Guam's congressman is a member of the House Armed Services Committee, and I remember it being a very big deal that his membership on that, when he secured that membership on the committee. We'll talk about that and whether it even matters who the Guam congressman or congresswoman is in an environment like this in Washington, D.C., and what this means to Guam's growing irrelevance in Washington, D.C. at the worst possible time during this military buildup, as this buildup affects us in many adverse ways. And there's an op-ed in the Pacific Daily News by Dave Lotz about the programmatic agreement and how it's a bad deal. And then the last thing I want to talk about is news coming out of international wires about and this is news, and this is not like news, this is like over the past few weeks. Reuters, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, of course, publications in Japan and Korea reporting how it's quite possible, it's actually anticipated that sometime soon, as in this year, the Japanese yen is going to appreciate against the US dollar. The Korean won already is showing those signs and is expected to make stronger growth even by the yen. And so it could be a signal of increased tourism. And if we don't get the increased tourism, I think that's our signal as peoples in the CNMI and Guam to get rid of Mariana's Visitors Authority and Guam Visitors Bureau. We'll get to these issues on the other side of the commercial break. Do stick with us, and I thank you so much for joining us on this live stream and on the replay.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
I'm seeing a very sad message here on the comments by Lisa Miador. Good morning, Troy. I ask our community to pray for our veterans. We will attend a funeral this Wednesday for a friend who was a disabled vet who took his life. So please check on your veteran friends, talk to them, and help them. We lose more than 17 veterans each day to suicide in our country. That is so sad. We have to continue to do more for them and advocate for them. Thank you. You know what, Lisa? Absolutely. Absolutely, Lisa. And one of the things that I was thinking about over the weekend, I'm sure we all see um, the homeless people, the unhoused along Route 16. There are many, like in different places, right? But Route 16, what's particularly stark is the number of them who are on wheelchairs and who absolutely have disabilities. If I'm not mistaken, a couple of them are veterans. They served our country um, either in Desert Storm or in, what is the name of the Afghanistan war? Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. I don't think any of them are Vietnam veterans. Um, and so, I mean, if our island, imagine that, like at the bottom of the rung, unhoused, disabled, in wheelchairs, unable to even row themselves. They don't have legs. They don't have the dexterity and the muscle, the strength to move the wheelchair on their own. They have to be pushed around. Imagine all those people who are not unhoused and not receiving services. And yeah, Lisa, yes, absolutely. God bless you, and God bless the veterans community. And thank you all to all of you who have served our country and who continue to serve our country throughout it all. As we've been going through, as we have been reporting and giving voice to people within the Guam Department of Education who are increasingly not just concerned, but terrified. I think we're past concern. I think we are at a point of terror for many people within the Guam Department of Education. And that's not just sources who are talking to me. Those are also sources talking to the Oversight Committee Chair in the legislature, Senator Vince Borja. They're talking to Senator Chris Barnett, who has been a longtime advocate of Guam DOE because he was the former Legislative Oversight Committee Chairman for Department of Education. And of course, other people who are receiving these same messages, right? And it's about the last 6 months of the WANPAD administration. And before that, it was about the Guam Education Board that hired this WANPAD administration. And the complaints against the board continue as well. But what has essentially transpired is there had been these long-standing complaints against board members or certain board members about how they were micromanaging the department. They were interfering in operations to the detriment. Oh, something happened to the internet. They were interfering in operations to the detriment of student learning, of teacher morale, of staff morale, of the financial affairs of the department. But it was because the board members were not themselves members of management. They could only pull strings using their influence as board members against the law to terrify management into making decisions that went against what the plan had always been within DU. And you have to remember, you have to consider, there was a revolution in public education that occurred during the Fernandez administration. And I believe John Fernandez came in, I want to say it was late 2011 or early 2012. And he left DOE, I want to say in 2022. And prior to John Fernandez, DOE was a wreck, an absolute down the hill. They couldn't get it together wreck. And the teachers, they were at their wits' end. And it had, of course, it had everything to do with, all the things that you expect them to be concerned about, right? Like they had low pay. They still have low pay, but their pay was much lower back then. The demands on them were higher. The number of students they had per classroom, the graduation rate, testing outcomes, the types of tests they were using, the types of instructional material they were forced to use. It was a hodgepodge of mess, right? And while John Fernandez didn't make things perfect, and there were still things that needed to be fixed, many things that needed to be fixed by the end of his administration, there was a revolution that happened where we saw this as a community, and we'll probably, when these kids go through their 30s and 40s, we're going to feel it on this side. The kids, I'm talking about the kids who grew up during the Fernandez era. When they're in their 30s and 40s, we're going to feel it in a lessening of crime in this island. I'm certain of it, because things got better during that time. Graduation rates, test scores, learning, teaching excellence, all of these different things. They're just this focus on the classroom, focus on the actual purpose of GDOE, right? And a lot of that was Joe Sanchez, who was the curriculum master that entire time. A lot of that was Erica Cruz, who was in charge of the principals at the time. A lot of it was Tim Fedenko, who had a great relationship for the most part, and Sanjay Sharma had a great relationship for the most part with GDOE management, and stood up against GDOE management when things went wrong. And so it was just, and of course, a lot of it was a great working relationship between John Fernandez and Governor Eddie Calvo, who was willing at whatever John Fernandez would ask for, Eddie Calvo was willing to give Guam DOE. That was, and that was what you called a synergy, a working together, right? And it's kind of ironic, right? And this is why I think a lot of people say it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat on Guam, because the stripes don't matter. But when you consider that Eddie Calvo is this so-called conservative Republican, you wouldn't expect him to have been the guy who was the big public education supporter, and who would give, with hardly much question, when John Fernandez would ask, or the Board of Education would ask, the resources that GDOE was asking for. Now, granted, it wasn't all, it wasn't everything, because that couldn't have been done financially, fiscally, right? But it was a lot. It's much more than this administration has ever done. And this administration has had access to billions of dollars in pandemic funds. And when you consider that this administration is Democrat, and you would expect that, they would be a lot kinder to public education, that's not what has happened. And so you had this revolution that occurred in public education, and it placed GDOE on the right path. Then Fernandez leaves, Joe Sanchez remains. They switch out Erica Cruz for somebody else. There's a couple of new administrations that come in. There's a little bit of instability with GDOE management. The board remains, and the board somehow manages. They fill this. It's a de facto filling of management vacuum, right? Because you had John Fernandez, those were big shoes to fill. And nobody was ever really able to fill, to this day, nobody's able to fill the John Fernandez shoes, right? Joe Sanchez tried to, Erica Cruz tried to, and Bobby Adamas tried to, but the board decided not to hire any of those three who rose up during the Fernandez, who had John Fernandez's ear, who had John Fernandez's trust, and who were part of that upward mobility of the Guam Department of Education. They were part of the team responsible for doing so. But the board went with the one person who applied out of all of them, who was a politician and who was not part of that team. And now it seems to have happened is that the nightmare that the board has been since Fernandez left has been reincarnated into an employee within the Department of Education, boots on the ground, doing the things that the board had tried to do behind closed doors as the senior employee of the department, the one who can make all of the operational decisions legitimately, Judy Wonpat as the superintendent. And we're beginning, no, we're not just beginning, we're in the midst of understanding from leaks coming out of that department how bad things are. And so that gives you the context of what I'm going to show you. This is how bad things were before Judy Wonpat became the superintendent of education. Doris Bukikosa on December 17, 2025, prior to Judy Wonpat's arrival as the superintendent, she goes before a community roundtable that Senator Vince Borja put together, held over at GDOE to, what do you call it? Hold on, let me just make sure this is off. Yeah, that's off. To get input about the governance structure of the Board of Education. And Doris Bukikosa recently retired from the department at the time. She goes off and she starts by saying, look, I can do this. I can say this because I no longer work within the department, but there are so many people who are scared to speak up because they will be retaliated against by the board. And she explains how that happens in practical terms. Imagine what the situation is now with the nightmare that is the board reincarnated into the number one employee responsible for the actual operations of the department, Judy Wonpat as the superintendent. Here is Doris Bukikosa in this December 17 clip, and it is rather eye-opening and truly, it's sad.
Am I on, really? Okay. Deputies, much better, right? I could use my outside voice because I've been retired for the last year. I've been I'm now a retired DOE employee. I have served the department, or actually the government of Guam, over 34 years before retiring. 19 of that in the schools, in the actual schools, working directly with students, parents, school staff, and administrators before moving to central office and working with divisions management. And let me just start with this before I go into my spiel. Chairman Borja, Dr. McNinch, you stated openly about, not to fear retaliation. I'm sorry, but maybe 75% of the people right here fear retaliation. And it's not from our management. It's not from our principals. It's from respective board members. There's a fear of principals to talk out because tomorrow or Monday, they're going to be moved to another school, not to their choice. And it's not about choice, it's about fear that we can't talk openly. And they're not worried about, well, we're going to be protected for whistleblower. It's going to happen. Why? Even in the years I've been here, I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. I was accused of illegally taking leave while I prepared for retirement. And it was made publicly on a socialized or publicized board meeting. After 34 years of service, that's the attitude I get from the board? Excuse me. I have worked so hard in my entire government career to earn that or deserve that. So when you talk about protection, there is nothing any of you can do. Why? Because the superintendent answers to the board. And if there's pressure from his boss, what choice do they have? Board members are known to call division heads, HR, payroll, and condemn or criticize all the people who are speaking out publicly about inappropriate behavior. And I'm sorry, even in GEB meetings that are publicized, respective chairpersons don't correct the inappropriate behavior. We see it publicly. Poor people named from management to support staff to division heads are publicly condemned and criticized, yet nothing's being done. We've made complaints about, and I'm sorry, about board members. There's been submissions to the chair and the body as a whole. Nothing's ever happened. There is never any kind of consequence to any board members who have done something inappropriate to employees where they have no business crossing that line. So I'm just starting with that before I go on. Sorry, there it is. You're welcome. And even teachers at the school sites fear, even though they're probably the one population of employees within the department that would not be removed because they are most needed to support that classroom. All right, so just really going back to this, in all of the points that were discussed or should be discussed in this meeting, I just want to remind everybody, having been in the department for over 30 years or the government, I experienced being under the governor. I have to say, there was a lot more politics going on. What I mean by that is interference. Of course, you have the director then as an appointee. You have a lot of political hirees coming into the department, not necessarily experienced enough to be in those positions. It made getting work very difficult. In addition to that, funds were so hard to get access to. The governor had the ability to transfer money around, which meant even now with lower or, transfers not happening or allotments not given, back in the day, hey, we can be promised how many millions, never see the light of day because the money was all tied to the general fund being moved around or funneled. No disrespect to the governor, honestly. But hey, when you got a pie and every agency wants a piece of that pie, yeah, you can promise education, safety, and health as your top priority on your platform, but it doesn't always happen. And I experienced that, having been in the government for that long. So here we go. A board is created. I have to say, I thought there was promise in that. Here was a body that was going to be policy making and governing, not operations. It was promising because it meant, hey, we have people that are going to advocate for the department. They're going to fight for our needs. They're going to go to the legislature and say, our department needs money. This is what we need the money for. And even though the legislator's going to say, hey, you're only going to get X number of dollars. No, senators, we need a whole lot more. A whole lot more, because we really can't even get the work done with the money you're giving us. Yet you and the community, society as a whole, still expects us as a department to get the work done. Not realizing, where did you think we're magically going to get this money? You expect X number of teachers? Well, the teachers aren't there. We don't have enough money. You expect support staff? How did you want us to do it? The board is saying, oh, sorry, you can't hire those people. Central office is what? Running on a skeleton crew because there's no money? Or the board is freezing those positions? I'm sorry, I don't understand how no one can get it. You want this department to function supporting 40-some schools, or 30, what are we down to now? 39, 38 schools? And your money is dwindling, but you still expect us to provide services and sometimes even more. Then what have we become? We rely so much more on federal dollars. I have to commend Deputy Sanchez for overseeing 99% of those federally funded activities, projects. I do. I know he's soon going to be leaving us. And I say us because I still associate myself with the department. But obtaining that money to get those services needed. And then what happens? The board has to review it and decides, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to approve for you to do those activities. And then what happens? Project leads, project managers, myself included at the time, has to defend to the U.S. Department of Education why those funds are unencumbered, why they're not liquidated in a timely manner. Because some board members are interfering and instructing the superintendent that no, you're not allowed to do that. It includes hiring, even of federally funded employees, of travel, not just off-island, of who gets to participate in activities, when really project personnel, project leads and managers know exactly who should be attending, who are the people who are going to come back and train. We need to build capacity in our department, not rely on others to come in and train us and act like, what, DOE are so dumb? We're not. We have great resource here. This board fails to understand that, hey, all you employees, you are a resource. You're the human resource. That's how work gets done. If you don't use that resource, how are the kids going to learn? How are the services going to be done? How is the work going to get done? How can you expect one person to do the work of 5 people? It's just not going to happen. So really, I do support a governing board, but those board members truly need to understand what their role and responsibility is. I'd like to see additional changes happen to the structure of the board. One is really clarification on their jurisdiction. 2 is once they've been elected, they need to have training on what your responsibilities and jurisdiction is. Because, hey, welcome the board members into the schools. But once you start interrogating employees, criticizing them, making administrators cry, even saying, I'm going to quote, sitting in the Teads Castle in their offices doing nothing, or they don't know what they're doing. I'm sorry, I was part of the Teads Castle, and I did so much stuff. I worked 14-hour days. Yes, I'm salary-based, but hey, I was technically earning $2 an hour. I can't even tell you how much work I put into this department. But for criticism like that, not just to be made in board meetings, but in printed media, and really, what was the board member, what understanding they have of the work we did? None. Yet, we're the ones who have to spend the money. We're the ones who have to implement activities. We have to work closely with the schools and make sure those activities are occurring. But this criticism, I looked at the board as an advocate. Did that happen? No, it almost like we became adversaries and enemies of the board. Are you not here to support us so we can provide the services to the students? I don't feel that's what's happening. It's not. We're pointing fingers and fighting with each other. How can we improve the department and get the needed services to the students and help the parents want to be involved in their child's education if all we're doing is pointing fingers and finding fault? We can't do that. We need to come in and say, how can I help you? What do you need me as a board member to do to help you get your job done? And no, I am not announcing a campaign. I am just saying how I perceive the role of a board member. I remember the day early on in this board when board members met with committee members. They had actual meetings. They had administrators and school personnel sitting in committees looking and reviewing policies. I exited in April of 2024. Pre-COVID, none of that was happening anymore. None of it. It just became this public show of, oh no, Central isn't doing their stuff. You know, these principals, they're just not fighting for their school. They're just not using the money or asking for money. Yes, the schools always ask for money. They always ask for more. Hey, I'm one of them that, Doris, can you get me this? Or what can I do to get this? I know other project leads here where they're being called and asked because the principals know how to get the resources. But we were not always at liberty to get that support out to them. And a big part of it was because the board was hindering what we could do. And it's not a slam on the board. I am supporting a governing board, but please, I'm begging you, work with us. And I keep saying us because I can never remove myself. I will always have a tie to this department. People can still call me up and ask me for help. But that's what I look for in the board. We need to stop, and whether you're elected or not, Mr. Fanengo, you can still help. Whether you're a voting member or not, you can still help. But I'd like to see those voting members truly take an effort in working with the schools, not being negative. Just really to close, or as I like to see some changes really. Aside from those, the training, maybe set up some kind of experiential knowledge necessary. I agree with you, Mr. Fanengo, get a student in here and stuff. But, you know, again, for lack of a better word, any Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street just to run because you don't need 100, you only need 100 signatures nowadays, or you don't even need signatures anymore to run. They have to have some knowledge or experience in the department. A student can say, hey, I went through the system. I knew what it was like. I was in school. But just to come in and say, nope, I want to be on the board. No. But I would, even though based on you want continuity, thank you very much. There should also be a limit. And based on the jurisdiction and authority, the understanding of the role, what are consequences when they overstep it? And how can a board member be removed?
Your board members.
Lastly, just the Education Act, the Fair Education Act. And it's in its theory, great. But I think as the government of Guam continues to, funds are not available, I think you need to revisit it, because as you continue to ask DOE to jump through certain hoops, pass certain things, and you don't give them money to do it, they aren't going to pass. And that's just setting us up for failure. But please, I beg you, I'm glad we had this forum. I don't know if more are needed, but I think we need to look at change soon, because we're suffering. The department is suffering. And I see it with now my son, who's with the department and working 18, 20 hours a day because he's a one-man show in his area. This department needs help, and he's not alone. Other areas are just like that. So I plead with you, if you can find them more money, please give them more money and let them have the freedom to use the money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bukikosa. Attorney Summerflat.
Now, what Dan Summerflex said was important too. It's just in the interest of time. I'll bring that to you at another time. But I want you to consider for a second that a couple of things. One, the reality that speech was made on December 17, 2025, before Judy Wampat came in as the superintendent. While the issue that GDOE employees, by and large, had at the time. And at the time, they were just as concerned about, and I know this because a bunch of them are our sources and they talk to me, okay? At the time, sorry. At the time, they were already afraid to say anything because the Guam Education Board, certain members of the Education Board would overreach. It's a violation of the law. Let's not mince words here. An illegal overreach into the department in order to punish people who were speaking out. And it was a pervasive thing. And it's one of those things where it wasn't just like in one place and this is just one person or two people or just 5 people saying this. It was people, dozens of them from throughout the department, many of whom didn't even know each other or were not on any first name basis, with the same story of overreach and retaliation. And that was just the Education Board. Consider now how that has been amplified. Because now, these same people and others, a growing chorus, are talking about how it's even worse with Judy Wampat as the superintendent, essentially doing what the board was doing, but now with operational authority. And the opacity is ridiculous. I have asked for several things from GDOE, a lot of information. It has to go through a FOIA. I FOIA'd Judy Wampat for all of her communications, whether it was WhatsApp, email, letters, memoranda, text messages between her and members of the board and her and people at Adelup. And they had the gall, they had the nerve to come back to me and say that none exist. There is no communication between Judy Wampat and the Board of Education and people over at Adelup. Give me a flipping break. Lies coming out of the department. Opacity from one corner of GDOE to the other. And the only light shining through are the whispers that can come from voices who do not feel that they have any voice whatsoever, because as soon as their voice is heard, they will be retaliated against, and it will be them and their families who will pay the price for the politics that have been played through and through over the years by the board, now transposed into this nightmare that is the Wampat administration over at GDOE. That's the first thing to consider about what Doris Bukikosa is saying. The second thing to consider about what Doris Bukikosa is saying is that she had to be retired since 2024 in order for her in December of 2025 to come out and to speak. And even at that, she was taking a risk that she would be retaliated against because her son works at GDOE. Despite that, she had the courage. And at the time, I believe her son was a probational employee. Like was just brand new over at GDOE, I think. And you hear the applause that came from people fed up, thankful, grateful that someone spoke up. There are so many others who want to speak up, just like Doris Bukikosa. But they can't. They won't. Because they know that if they do, they'll be slapped down hard. This is the kind of thing that's supposed to be unacceptable to us as citizens of Guam about our government. And so I think the onus falls on the Guam legislature. And Senator Vince Borja, he talked to us last week from his vacation. He's on vacation with his family, but he interrupted his vacation to talk to us about this growing issue. And he is pondering the idea of ways to remove members of the board. Because here's the thing, Doris Bukikosa is right. You know, you can have whistleblower, whatever, hotline and everything. But if the board is still allowed to call the shots and there's no consequences, then how is that worth it for anybody to be a whistleblower? There's no guarantee of any protection for them because the buck stops at the board. But if there were removal mechanisms for ward members, maybe they would think twice about their illegal overreach. On the other side of the commercial break, what I want to talk about is Guam's growing irrelevance in the federal structure, and how a House Armed Services Committee chairman's markup of the NDAA for next year does not include housing, which is a big deal for us. That's like, basically, we have no voice, we have no say, right? But I also might wonder whether it even matters under the current political situation, under the current Congress. Does it even matter who the delegate to the House is? Does it even matter? Like, is a Moylan or a Doris or Lim Tiaco, if they were in, whoever was in the seat right now, could they effectuate any change? It's a question to ponder, considering the political situation. We'll talk about that on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with us. There's a reason that I elevated that to the evening show, because it was a lot, right? And so it took up 45 minutes, and but we're a well spent 45 minutes discussing that issue, of course. There is a story in the Guam Daily Post by Walter Ujoa about something pretty troubling, and the Pacific Center for Island Security, I think is the name of it, the Robert Underwood Center with Leland Bettis, raised concerns in this Post article about something being reported out of the House Armed Services Committee, on which the Guam's delegate, Jim Moylan, sits, and something called the chairman's mark. Now, this still goes through a full committee markup, but a chairman's markup, unless something, and I don't know if Congressman St. Nicholas is watching this right now, but if he's watching the live show or the replay, I ask him to please pipe up on this, or just please let us know. The internet dropped significantly. Okay, so anyway, to let us know whether this is something that can happen, so, or if this is what it really is. So my understanding is a House committee chairman is very powerful. And when the House committee chairman makes a markup on a bill, that is typically the bill that makes it onto the House floor. And it's kind of difficult to make changes after that. But changes are possible in the committee markup. You just have to rally up the members of the committee, and you have to jump through certain hoops in order to get the committee to make that markup, which didn't survive the chairman's markup. And so, there's a lot of angling there, right? And then it's next to impossible to make those changes on the House floor. That's where the votes happen and all that stuff, right? So in this chairman's markup, language for, I think it's more than $100 million in construction funding for on-base housing was removed. And it was one of the more important pieces, if not the most important piece, to address the military's adverse effects on the economy, the local economy for the outside the fence population, us. Those of us who rent, those of us who would like to buy a home, those of us who are being priced out of paradise. Now, I don't want to be one of those people who blames the military entirely on the housing situation. Part of the housing, the horrendous prices we have in the housing market has to do with interest rates. Another part of it has to do with the cost of construction. Another part of it has to do with Section 8 and Section 8 competition with military, what do you call that dumb thing? That rate, that housing rate that they have, base overseas housing allowance. The Section 8 competition with overseas housing allowance is like a terrible vortex in terms of making things more unaffordable for the rest of us. But there's also the infiltration of the CCP in the development of houses and the purchasing of houses way above market price over the past 15 years in order to artificially increase housing prices on Guam. It's part of the CCP they have all their different brilliant strategies to attack America without ever launching a single physical attack, and part of it is economic warfare, and that's part of what they do, right? So it's not just the military that does this stuff, but I mean, in order to whittle away at this affordability issue, like they're a part of it. And what the story doesn't capture is whether and what Congressman Jim Moylan has done as a member of this committee in order to help to stave off what the chairman of the HASC just did, and also to place in things that are beneficial not just to the military, but to the civilian population through this NDAA. That has always been a top priority of Guam's delegates, is to get into the NDAA what is necessary, what is desired by the civilian population here. And that was always been a vehicle for something like that. But it seems that now it's a vehicle where things are being shaved back, not just for the civilian population, but also for the good of the military. Remember, the military wanted this stuff. But at the same time, is this something that Jim Moylan has any control over? One. And if anybody wants to criticize him on that, politically, I would ask, is this something Mary Doris could have done differently, could have gotten a different result on? Is this something Alicia Limtiaco could have gotten a different result on? And I'm not talking about in next year's budget. I'm talking about right now, considering the political circumstances. And I think that it should come as no surprise that what is important to Guam and to us as civilians here would be the furthest thing from the contemplation of the current Congress. These are the same members of Congress. Remember, the HASC is primarily made up of the war hawks and the defense spending hawks from the southeastern United States. Your Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, these places that have that house the military industrial complex. They get all their campaign donations from their family members. They're on boards of all of these different defense spending agencies, like your Lockheed Martins and all that stuff. And these are the people who make money off of the defense posture of Guam. Yes, they also make money off of the shipping realities and the Jones Act. And these are the same people who, the same members of Congress who have not cared one iota about how their decisions regarding shipping, regarding moving things from the Indo-Pacific over to the southeastern United States, would negatively affect not just defense posture, but Guam's local economy, the CNMI's economy, because all they care about is what's going to affect their economy over there. These are the same people who control the House Armed Services Committee. So again, I have to ask, does it even matter how hard and what strategies are employed by Guam's delegate, no matter who the delegate is? Because it's not like any of that would override the personal and career interests of the politicians who run the House Armed Services Committee. And I think that the solution for Guam and the CNMI has got to be something that is larger than who we elect to Congress. And everyone can have their debate about who's a better delegate, right? Like, would it be Jim Moylan or Mary Doris or Alicia Limtiaco? And in the CNMI, everyone can have that debate between Kim King-Hines and Galvin de Leon Guerrero. But just for this issue, when it comes to the House Armed Services Committee, is the issue really about who all of the different jurisdictions elect to run the next Congress? And I think that's where things go. I don't know what's wrong with this stupid, with this connection. I think it has to do with the router that I'm using, because the real router got fried last night. I have to take it into Docomo this morning. Anyway, when we come back, I'm not going to go on the third round of this because I'm having issues with the connection. So we'll talk about the tourism thing later, either tonight or I'll move that to tomorrow morning. But I was going to talk about how Like, all the tourist people in both Guam and the Sinai have continued to tell us, and it's not incorrect, right, that one of the reasons tourists are not coming to Guam and the Sinai is because of the value of the yen against the dollar and the value of the won against the dollar. And so that is a true thing. You know, you just, things are more expensive in Guam and the Sinai for people who are from Japan and Korea. That's a thing. And what we see is expensive. Imagine what they see is expensive, considering that they're trading in yen and won, which is significantly weak against the U.S. dollar. That is about to change. Economists anticipate that very soon, as in this year, the yen is going to start appreciating against the dollar. And already the won is appreciating and is expected to grow even stronger against the dollar than the yen is expected to grow against the dollar. And that's just this year. And things kind of depend on how the Bank of Japan moves forward with interest rates, but they see it coming. People see it coming. This has been reported in Reuters, in the Wall Street Journal, in Financial Times, in publications throughout Japan and Korea. And so the main thing that both Marianas Visitors Authority and Guam Visitors Bureau have been telling us about why tourism sucks, aside from themselves, because they're never going to blame themselves, that's about to change. And so if we don't see the tourists come, I think, my friends, that can be our very objective point where we'll be able to say, get rid of MVA, get rid of GVB. We'll have that conversation another time. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning. I apologize for not going live last night, and I apologize for the connection issues that we're having this morning. I will get that resolved today. You all have a wonderful day. God bless you.
Guam AutoSpot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off, or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive.
This stuff's hitting the spot.